A confirmation about the audio, please, guys. If you're able to hear me out perfectly well, kindly confirm the same. Thank you. Jay, you have a couple of questions that what do you understand by intrusive forms? Briefly describe various intrusive forms. So it talks about the intrusive landforms that you have, the batholiths, laccoliths, lopoliths, etc. And here you have to describe about how in the interior itself sometimes magma cools down. Why does it cool down in the interior? That is something that you have to concentrate upon in this question. And the other question, that our Earth is a play field for two opposing groups of geomorphic processes. Here you have to talk about the balance between the tectonic forces or the endogenic forces which are acting from the interior and the leveling forces, that is the exogenic forces which are acting from the exterior. That is what you have to concentrate on. Okay. Yes, Pranay, that is expected that because of MJO, a kind of a low pressure or a kind of a high pressure or suppressed rainfall phase is presently prevalent in the region of the Indian Ocean, due to which it is also suspected that June is going to be drier as compared to the previous years, and we are going to receive on an average slightly lesser rainfall. Aarti, if you have gotten around 6.5 out of 15, then there is some scope of improvement. So look at the feedback which has been given. Ideally, whenever you are writing an answer, just think about it that it is not only about the content, but content is the king. So without content, no answer will be given good marks. So ensure that you have written every perspective of it. Think about it, your answer from the point of view of an evaluator. Now I understand that is very, very difficult because we have a general bias about anything that we write, that this is the best piece of writing that has ever come into the earth. So that is why it is very different to have difficult to have an objective viewpoint of that. But nonetheless, if you take a look at your answer, analyze your answer and think about it, that where is it that you can make maybe the introduction a bit brief, maybe the content more precise, maybe you can underline the subheadings a bit, maybe you can include some sketches in between. So do this, and slowly and steadily the marks will automatically improve. Lower course, Sai Babu, see, whenever you have, so we talked about the stages of the river movement. In the stages of the river movement, we observe that it has got an upper course. Upper course is where the river ends up originating. Then you have the middle course, the mature stage, and the lower course, where it eventually ends up meeting the sea. That is the lower course. Okay. See, Pranay, the Western disturbance which has been happening now, this is a kind of an exceptional year for the Western disturbances to be prolonged and sustained for this long. Otherwise, Western disturbance ideally by the month of April comes to an end. The only reason that Western disturbance is able to sustain itself for so long is because of still the presence of cold winds prevalent in the subtropics or in the temperate areas. So that means there is still a kind of a frontal formation taking place. So as long as you will have those cold winds, and unless and until you don't have a significant shift of the ITCZ, so it is going to continue. You might expect a couple of more of these to occur before the onset of monsoon. Can you write examples in the exam in the diagrams? Absolutely, yes. That is required. Examples need to be written. Okay? That is what makes your answer a bit more authentic. So, hello, a very warm good morning to all of you, and welcome to Baiju's Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to another session of geography. Welcome, in fact, to probably the last weekend of geography. Today, we are going to have a session from 10 to 8. And the precise reason for having that session from 10 a.m. in the morning as compared to 12 p.m. is very simple, that we are going to have, or we are going to try to end the session early tomorrow. Tomorrow, we will also be holding a live prelims discussion on YouTube, where we shall be discussing the questions which have appeared in the examination. And all the various different faculties will be present before you. And we shall be discussing and analyzing each of the questions, that what can be the relevant answer, why this question has been asked, and so on and so forth. We shall try to form a kind of an analysis. So that is why the effort shall be to end the session tomorrow. Tomorrow's weekend session, we shall try to end it by around 4:30 p.m. So that is why we are going to hold 2 hours of extra session for today. I hope you are geared up for that, and I hope we can sustain that. Anyways, it is a portion of Indian geography, and Indian geography is much more relatable with our day-to-day lives, something that we have experienced quite vividly from ourselves, on our own as well. Now, what is it that we had discussed the previous weekend? So the previous weekend, we had initiated the discussion from the portion of the coral reefs itself, the types of coral reefs that you find. Then we looked at the Indian physiography. We not only looked at the classification of physiography, but we also tried to understand the formation of different physiographical features. Now, the formation of physiographical features, that is something which is going to help us understand when we take up the next modules, for example, soil, mineral distribution, minerals and industries. So in those cases, this particular portion of formation in terms of physiography is going to come to a great help. Having said that, after understanding the portion of physiography in detail, we understood the drainage systems. What do we understand by the drainage systems? We analyzed what do we mean by sequent streams, insequent streams, what are the type of sequent streams. We took the example of those as well, where we understood what are consequent and what are subsequent streams, what are antecedent streams, and what are the examples of superimposed streams, in which kind of landforms do we experience that. And then we looked at the river systems of India. There we analyzed the various different rivers which are in existence in the country, their importance, their utility, and also how they end up being classified. So we have the Himalayan river system. We looked at the properties of the Himalayan river, where we understood that why is it that certain Himalayan rivers, they end up frequently changing their course from their earlier predefined channel. Suddenly they will end up moving across a new path, causing devastation for anything which lies across their path. We also looked at the conditions, that why every year do we come across a scenario where the Himalayan rivers, they end up getting flooded. Then after that, we had initiated the discussion about the various different river systems, few of their features, and then took up the portion of interlinking of rivers, and what are the pros and the cons, advantages, disadvantages. Why is it that if interlinking is to be carried, why it should be carried, or why not? It is a program which, or what are the disadvantages associated when we talk about interlinking. So all those factors we had discussed last weekend. Now, today we are going to initiate the discussion from the forests of the country. Forest and soil, this is also sometimes classified as a portion of biogeography. But however, this is not the correct classification, in the sense, because now biogeography is something that you have to read separately in the portion of environment ecology altogether. So here we are putting it under the portion of Indian geography, where we shall be analyzing the forests that are present in the country. Now, this is something which is relevant for your examination, both for your prelims as well as for your mains. You find number of questions coming from these particular portions, number of questions appearing from the portion of forests. Now let us analyze what kind of questions are the expected ones. So for example, in the prelims, you can get questions about types of forest, types of forests that we have, classification or conditions required for the growth of these forests, that is rainfall. Then after that, regional or regions where you find these forests, or rather, we can talk about it in the form of distribution of the forests. Of forests, okay, and also example of species of trees. So these are the areas where questions in the prelims are very frequently asked. Then after that, in the mains examination, you generally get questions revolving around the fact about state of forest report. So that is a kind of a biennial report which is generated by the Forest Survey of India. So UPSC tends to ask the trends indicated by the forest report, that whether the forested area is increasing or not, whether we have an increase in very dense forest or the mangrove forest. So the trends indicated by the forests. So this is a portion where we shall be covering the latest of the forest report. But then you have to understand, if you are appearing for the exam next year, you can expect another forest report to be released later this part of the year or early next year. So that is where, if you are appearing for the exam, please get hooked on to the latest report and analyze the latest report, because from this report, sometimes a question can also be framed in the prelims examination about a kind of a MCQ, that very dense forest area is increasing or decreasing, which are the states having largest coverage of area in terms of forest cover. These can be the types of questions which are oftentimes asked in the prelims also. So all these portions we are going to address in these, but in the discussion for the forests, and we are going to try to understand that where is it and why is it that you find different types of forest. Now, ideally, I would suggest to you that before reading this chapter, before approaching this chapter in detail, I would suggest to you that kindly go for the portion of climate. Okay, kindly study the portion of climate and rainfall distribution. So after this, once you understand the rainfall distribution across the country, it will be a kind of a natural progression in order to understand that where, in what amount of rainfall, what kind of forests will grow. So always advisable to get an idea about the climate and rainfall distribution observed across the various parts of the country. For example, we know that western part of Western Ghats, that receives very high amount of rainfall. We do know that the northeastern states, they do receive very high amount of rainfall. So if we have that much of an idea, that is going to help us understand that what kind of forest do we find in that particular region. So always advisable to do that. So without further ado, let us initiate the discussion and let us understand the different types of forests that we end up finding across the various parts of the country. So here, when we talk about the different types of forests to be found in the country, you have to understand that we have a variety of forest types overall. So starting with the portion of tropical evergreen and semi-evergreen forests. Now, these are the types of forests that you end up finding in areas where the amount of rainfall which occurs is generally above 200 centimeter per year. Okay, in those areas where you will have more than 200 centimeter per year, will you find these kinds of forests. Now there also, if we talk about tropical evergreen, generally found in areas where you have rainfall, annual rainfall exceeding to 20 or 250 centimeter per year, and semi-evergreen somewhere between 200 190 to 220 semi-evergreen forests. So this is in general rainfall greater than 200 centimeter per year. Semi-evergreen in itself, generally, always I'll attach the word generally. So rainfall greater than 220 centimeter per year. Now, when we talk about a region experiencing rainfall, it is not going to happen that, let's suppose, a particular area is experiencing 200 centimeter rainfall. Right next to it, an area will receive 50 centimeter. No, the rainfall variation is very gradual. As a result of that, the change in the type of vegetation that you come across, that is also going to be very, very gradual. Okay, so always when you take a look at the type of vegetation, the change in vegetation is going to be very, very limited, very, very gradual. So beyond the region and the stretches of evergreen and semi-evergreen forest, you will always come across what is referred to as the tropical deciduous forests. Now, deciduous forests, what are they? Why are they referred to as deciduous forest? That is because they are able to shed their leaves. So during the harsh weather conditions, that is when the amount of rainfall, let's say, is very limited. So that is where you end up getting these deciduous forests which will shed their leaves during these harsh conditions. So these deciduous forests typically to be found. Now these are also of two types. If you take a look at the deciduous forests, these are also of two types. You have in the rainier areas, in the regions where the rainfall is high, so you have moist deciduous. Moist deciduous. And that is to be found typically in the regions where you have 120 to 140 centimeter of rainfall, but generally we associate it between 100 centimeter to around 200 centimeter per year. That is where you will come across moist deciduous. And in the less rainier areas, you have dry deciduous. That is where you have the rains between 70 centimeter to around 100 centimeter per year. Okay. Now, across the parts of the country, majority of the regions, they end up experiencing rainfall on an average between 70 to 200 centimeter per year. So that is why across the parts of the country, tropical deciduous forest is always going to be the most dominant forest across the country. It has got the largest aerial coverage across the country. Okay, it has got largest aerial coverage. Aerial coverage across the country. Then we have tropical thorn forests. So thorn forests are typically to be found in very dry regions of the world and very dry regions of the country, which don't end up receiving adequate amount of rainfall, very dry. So that is why in these areas, in many of the trees, you will find the presence of thorns, lack of leaves. Leaves are very smaller in order to adapt to these dry conditions. For example, in the eastern part of Western Ghats, which is the rain shadow or the leeward side of the Western Ghats, there you will find eastern part of Maharashtra, Telangana, some parts of Tamil Nadu also you will find that. Then significantly in the portion of Gujarat, some portions of Western Madhya Pradesh, significant portions of Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, in all these areas, tropical thorn forests. So here, rainfall in between 50 centimeter, even lesser than that, to around 70 centimeter per year. That is the total amount of rainfall required for the growth of these forests. And then we have montane forests. Now, montane forests, when we refer to it, these are the types of forests that you find in mountainous areas, right? Wherever you have the presence of the mountains, that is where you will find the montane forest. Because let us understand this basic fact that when we talk about the mountainous region, it is not going to be the condition that from the base of the mountain to the top you will find the same kind of trees. Because at the base, the amount of rainfall will be very high. At the foothills of the mountains, the amount of temperature or the temperature observed will be very high also as compared to the top. So maybe at the base of the mountains, you will end up finding in certain cases evergreen, deciduous forests, all these kinds of forests you will find. As you go up in altitude, temperate forests because of lower temperatures. As you go further up, you'll find only the presence of grasslands, summer grasslands. As you go further higher up, mosses and lichens. But the mountainous areas in the northern part of the country are very distinct from the mountainous area in the southern part of the country, both in terms of temperature as well as in terms of altitude. So that is why we are going to understand the montane forest observed in the northern part of the country and in the region of Nilgiris, Vindhyas, and in those areas also, and the Satpuras, what are the montane forests observed in that area. So these are forests in mountainous areas. Variety of forests in mountainous regions. And then we have littoral and swamp forests. So littoral and swamp forests, basically, what do we understand by swamp? When you hear about the term swamp, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? So swampy and marshy areas are those regions where you have an oversaturation of water. Soil is oversaturated with water. In many of the areas, soil has got significant portion of water and grain. So let's say in the coastal regions, let's say across the island territories, let's say across large lakes and reservoirs, in all those areas where you will find some amount of muddy soil which is prevalent, marshy soil which is prevalent, there you will find littoral and swamp forest to be very predominant. So these are the various different types of forests that you will come across. Let us analyze each one of them separately, and let us try to understand the regional spread as well. So here, just take a look at it. Why I was telling you about looking at the portion of the forest distribution along with, and only after you have understood the rainfall distribution, because observe, it appears that both the maps are very similar in terms of the shape, and it can be juxtaposed on top of each other. So observe in the areas where we have very high amount of rainfall, typically western portion of Western Ghats and the portion of northeastern mountains. In both these areas, you will observe you have the presence of very dense evergreen and semi-evergreen forests. Then, for example, observe the drier areas. The drier areas which receive very little amount of rainfall. In those areas, you will have the presence of thorn forest. Then majority of the landmass is actually covered by the areas receiving on an average between 70 to 200 centimeter of rainfall, and that is what occupies the deciduous forest for the rest of the world, rest of the country as well. So just the areal spread of rainfall distribution will significantly enhance your conceptual clarity that what kind of forests are to be found. So here, first of all, let us start with the portion of tropical evergreen forests. Now, why are these referred to as evergreen forests? Now, the reasoning of it is very simple. In simple terms, if you refer to it, so the forests appear to be green throughout the year. That is why it is evergreen. Now, here the counter argument might come that look, all the forests they appear green. You wouldn't have come across a forest which appears white or brown. Particularly in a country, tropical country like India, all the forests will give that greener appearance. So what distinguishes this evergreen forest? Why it is referred to as an evergreen? So here, the reason is because here at different points of time, the trees will shed their leaves. All the trees as a part of their growing cycle, etc., they do shed their leaves. But then if let's say at one point of time some of the trees have shed their leaves, the other portions of the forest they will hold that greenish appearance. If let's say these trees they shed their leaves, the earlier ones by that point of time will grow their leaves back. So at any point of time you will not come across a scenario where the entire forest has gone for shedding of the leaves. So at any point of time, you will have a large area of greenliness covered in this region. So that is why tropical evergreen. Okay, because at any point of time this forest will give you an appearance of greenery, unlike the case of deciduous forest, which we'll take a look at. Now here you will study this in environment also. Now here the resource which is available in plenty is moisture. This will be present only in those areas where the moisture is very predominant. So this is where moisture will be sufficient. Moisture in the form of rainfall, very high. So the trees, they will be competing for another resource. So the trees require which two resources? Availability of moisture, availability of sunlight. So sunlight is the resource for which the trees will be competing. So trees compete for sunlight. And in order to compete for sunlight, what is the solution that they have? These trees, they will start growing taller. In order to have an access to sunlight, they will start growing taller and taller. That is why in these regions, you'll find very tall trees. Very tall trees will be present in the region. Now, other than that, once the trees, let's say they grow taller. Now, in that case, as the trees are taller, they will require more access to sunlight. So the canopy of the trees also is very large. What do we understand by canopy? So when we talk about the trees, it has got a foliage. So this is basically what is referred to as the canopy cover. Canopy of the tree. So because they have to gain and hog on to the maximum amount of sunlight, that is why here you will come across very broad canopy of the trees. The trees will have very broad canopy. Now, as a result of this, you will have, what do you think will be the availability of sunlight at the bottom? What do you think? At the forest floor, will there be availability of sunlight or not? The answer is no. Good. Because all the trees, they are going to block that sunlight. So the availability of sunlight at the forest floor is almost negligible. So when you don't have available sunlight at the forest floor, that will never allow the growth of plants. So because of lack of sunlight at the forest floor, the entire region will be devoid of smaller plants, the smaller grasses, shrubs, etc. So lack of sunlight means no plant growth at the forest floor. No plant growth at the forest floor. Now, when you don't have a plant growth at the forest floor, you can automatically think about it that you will not find many herbivores in this region. Whatever herbivore population will be present on the top of the trees. That is why this is an area where you will find lot of arboreal species of animals. Arboreal means the monkeys, the apes that you have. So they will be dominating, and also a lot of bird population. It is these birds which will help these trees to reproduce by spraying their seeds and spreading their fruits all across the region of the forest. So that is where the reproduction happens. Overall, the soil in this region is very significantly lacking in terms of organic content. So soil lacks organic content. All these you will study in significant detail whenever you attend the session of environment and ecology. You will study in detail about the rates of decomposition, what happens, why is it that soil will have organic component, why is it that the soil may not have organic component. All of that will be covered in environment ecology. But here it is just enough and adequate to understand what these are. So basically, these are very tall trees which require high amount of rainfall, and where you will find the presence of a kind of a broader canopy. Canopy is the green foliage that you have on top of the tree. That is the canopy, that is considered to be the canopy of the tree. Now, if we analyze the regional spread of it, so it will be in those areas where we receive very high amount of rainfall. So which are the areas where we receive very high amount of rainfall? So western part of Western Ghats, Andaman Nicobar Islands, and northeastern states. So in those areas, we will end up receiving very high quantity of rainfall. So western slope of Western Ghats, hills of northeastern region, Andaman Nicobar Islands. So in those areas, you will find them. Annual precipitation over 220 centimeter is relevant, and mean annual temperature about above 22 degrees Celsius. Why? We are looking at tropical evergreen. Tropical evergreen means in the tropics. We are not talking about temperate evergreen. So tropical evergreen mean annual temperature above, average annual temperature above 22 degrees Celsius. And here you have certain species, for example, rosewood, mahogany, any, ebony, etc. These are the example of the species of trees that you find in this particular area. Then as you move to the boundary regions of the areas which receive so high rainfall, you will come across the regions which receive close to around 200 centimeter of rainfall, and that is where semi-evergreen trees will be observed. Now, in the case of semi-evergreen trees, sometimes you have certain creepers, climbers, etc., which you will find in the case of the tree trunks. You will have some amount of undergrowth also, which will be observed here and there. So all of that basically brings about some greenliness at the bottom portion of the forest as well. And that is where semi-evergreen name is given. So less rainier areas as compared to the tropical evergreen. So in the portions of Western Ghats, Northeastern region, and Andaman Nicobar Islands, those areas which receive comparatively slightly lesser amount of rainfall. So main species are cedar, hollock, and kale. Now, once you go to the boundary regions of these forests, you come across regions where the rainfall amount is particularly less. Now, when the rainfall quantity is very less or particularly less, the trees, they will shed their leaves during the dry season and will grow them back when the amount or the availability of moisture is sufficient. That is a property that you will find. So in that case, when the trees will shed their leaves during the dry season, the entire forest will appear almost dry, as if some calamity has occurred. And again, once the first rains of the monsoons come, these will spring back to life. All the green leaves will start growing back again. So that is why deciduous forests, they are also referred to as monsoon forests. It is because of the availability of rainfall in this region where the leaves of the trees, they start growing back quite significantly. So that is the quality that you find in the case of deciduous forests. Now here you will find that the rainfall exists between 70 to 200 centimeter in general, and they grow in areas in between 70 to 200 centimeter. But in more rainier areas, you have moist deciduous. In less rainier areas, you have the conditions of dry deciduous. Without organic content also, they can grow. It is not as if, see, trees require macronutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. They are required for the trees to grow. So even if, let's say, they don't have carbon compounds, they don't have the organic matter, they will grow. If you have organic compound, it grows much faster. But in the case of the so many of the regions you will have where you don't have an organic content, soil is very poor, almost negligibly having any organic content, still the plants will grow. So organic component encourages the plant growth, increases the rate of the growth. It is not quintessential for the availability of plant growth. Okay. Now, after that, here, if we analyze the moist deciduous forests, so basically think about it, all those woods that you have come across, or the types of woods which are used for, let's say, commercial purposes, furniture making, etc. So for all those commercial purposes, the species that of woods that you have, teak, sal, sisam, hurra, sandalwood, mahua, amla, kusum, all of these, typically the commercial purpose woods, that is something that you find in the moist deciduous. Now it is this shisham, one of the costlier woods that you have, which is being smuggled in large amounts from India to the outside world. And then you also have the case of sandalwood. Now, sandalwood, again, typically to be found in these deciduous forests, mostly in the Nilgiris in the southern part of the country. Now, this sandalwood was also smuggled in large quantities. I am sure you would have heard about the smuggling kingpin in the southern part of the country with the name of Veerappan. Now, that was the individual who would smuggle large quantities of sandalwood out of these forests along with the elephant ivories, and would wreak havoc in terms of the entirety of the portion of the Nilgiris in southern part. So that is the moist deciduous. So where will you find it? Where ideally the rainfall quantum is between 120 to 140, 120 centimeter to somewhere around 160 centimeter also, 180 centimeter also, you'll find these forests in very predominant quantity. Now, where do you find eastern states along the foothills of Himalayas, eastern slopes of the western Ghats, comparatively less rainfall, Andaman Nicobar Islands, parts of Chhattisgarh, parts of Jharkhand, West Bengal, Odisha. These are the regions where you will find these deciduous. Some parts of Andaman Nicobar Islands, they will have all of these, that is evergreen, deciduous, semi-evergreen, all of that will be prevalent. Okay. Then we have dry deciduous forest. To which country are these smuggled? It depends. It is smuggled to many of these countries which require the wood for furniture. Then we have the dry deciduous, the drier regions of the deciduous forest. Now here you will end up finding larger animals in existence, because here there is a lot of spacing in between the availability of the trees or the density of the trees. Density of the trees in general is basically lesser in terms of dry deciduous. So that is why here you will find a lot of the herbivore population as well, because the the small grasses, they will also start dominating. So majority of the parts of northern plains, that is plains of the Indo-Gangetic region, higher rainfall area of Peninsular Plateau, and northern Indian plains in general, you will come across these kinds of dry deciduous forest. Example, tendu. Now you would have heard about tendu leaves. Now tendu leaves, dried tendu leaves, they are collected, and those dried tendu leaves are collected and they are basically rolled on to make handmade cigarettes that you have, the local cigarettes, the BDs that you have. So there the tendu leaf is used, and that is where the community in that region, for example, in significant portions of eastern part of Maharashtra, in some portions of Telangana also, you will find a lot of the tribal folks, they are indulged in the activity or the profession of collection of these tendu leaves. So what they end up doing is they will collect all those tendu leaves, and eventually these tendu leaves will be cut down in proper shapes. The dried tendu leaves which have fallen on the ground, they are collected, they are cut into proper shapes, and then they are rolled into the BDs that is used for smoking purposes. And this is a source of occupation for a large population, and they are very meagerly paid, in the sense that if you have to analyze or if you have to get an idea about how they are paid, so basically all those leaves, in many of the cases, they are woven along a string, and that string an individual ties around its their own head, and for every tie that they make, they get around 10 rupees or 20 rupees. So that is where they get very little amount of money for that. Now here you will also find the very prominently smuggled red sanders. Now red sanders is a tree which will take close to around 15 to 20 years to mature, and it is to be found typically in the region around Andhra Pradesh, right? In the Sheshchalam region, you will find a lot of these red sanders. Now, these are particularly tall as well. And these red sanders, they have a unique property where they can be used for furniture, significantly very costly furniture. And it has been used for furniture making in Eastern Asia for many centuries altogether. So even today, you will find a lot of these red sanders being smuggled to the region of East Asia, China, Japan. Now, in Japan, the wood of these red sanders, they are utilized to manufacture acoustic musical instruments. So that is where red sanders is typically smuggled. Okay. Now, all of these are basically the examples of dry deciduous. The moist deciduous, the commercial trees, again in moist deciduous, that is teak, sal, sesame. These are moist deciduous, and these will be the dry deciduous. Okay. Now, then when we come to less rainier areas, the areas which receive even lesser rainfall, exactly in the rain shadow zones, etc., there you will come across what is referred to as the thorn forest. Now, for example, semi-arid areas of southwest Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh. In all these areas, you will find the thorn forest. Also in portions of Telangana, there also you will find it. Some portions of Maharashtra also you will find it. And some small regional spread will be observed even in the case of Tamil Nadu. But these are the predominant areas where you will find them. Here you can include Telangana as well. Telangana is particularly dry in terms of availability of rainfall. Now, here the example Khair, Neem, Khejri, Palas, Bear. Now observe one particular factor here. Observe these trees, right? Palas, Bale, and Khair. Observe here also Khair, Palas. So these are the trees which are consistent in both these areas, which means what? That these tree types can exist even in the conditions where you have 50 centimeter, 40 centimeter of rainfall, even in areas where you have 60, 70 centimeter of annual rainfall. So generally, when you have any particular kind of tree, it will be coexistent in the regions of the rainfall received in the surrounding areas. Okay, so the ecology in one region almost suits up the ecology of the other region, the transition zone. You'll find these kinds of trees in existence. Then we have the montane forests, the forests that are to be found in the mountainous areas of the country. Now, these montane forests in general, basically in the mountainous areas, you have a variety of tree types which you will come across. And why is that? Is because of the simple reason that when you think about a mountainous area, as you move up the slope, the amount of rainfall which is received, that starts reducing. So there is a variability in rainfall. Rainfall reduces with height. And also temperature reduces. Reduces. So as a result of that, at the bottom, at the foothills and up to a height of around 1,000 meters above sea level, you will find the presence of tropical vegetation here. Tropical deciduous, tropical evergreen. So you will have tropical vegetation. Then as you move between the height of around 1,000 to 1,500 meters to around 3,000 meters roughly, there you will find the presence of temperate vegetation, that is the conifers trees, that is where you also have the temperate grasslands. All of that you will find in the region above that. So you have the temperate area. And then further higher up, at an altitude of 4,000 meters and above, you will end up finding regions covered in snow in many of the cases, or covered under mosses and lichens. So those will be the dominant characteristic. So let us take a look at few of the types of forests that you find in mountainous areas. So when we take a look, so first of all, foothills, you'll find deciduous forests, right? In northeastern India, in the hilly areas, in the bottom of the foothills, there you will find evergreen broadleaf forest as well. Oak, chestnut, rhododendron. These are the few of the trees that you definitely will find. And then observe, as you start moving up in height, you start experiencing the presence of temperate type of forest. You further go up, there you will come across cheer pine, chinar, deodar, the typical conifers that you come across. Now, in all these, for example, when we talk about cheer pine, chinar, now in these trees you have needle shape of leaves. And why is it that we have needle-shaped leaves in these trees? In order to withstand the conditions of very heavy snowfall. So if imagine the leaves are very, very broad, and if you have significant amount of snowfall which occurs, the amount of weight which will be exerted by that accumulated snow on the leaf can make the leaf to break off and fall off. So that is why, in order to adapt to that, the leaves are needle shaped. And also the shape of the trees is like a cone with a broader bottom, broader base, so that it can accommodate and withstand the weight imposed by the overlying layer of snow. So that is something that you find as a characteristic in the case of the conifers. Now, many of these trees, for example, cheer pine, they also end up secreting a kind of an oil, right? They also end up secreting an oil from the branches, from the various leaves. And that oil can be used for biofuel. Okay? So, can be used for biofuel. Example, Sikkim is one of those states which manufactures biofuel by the oil secreted from these cheer pines. But at the same time, you have to understand that any particular tree which secretes these oil during the dry season, it is this oil which will further add fuel in case there is a forest fire. That is why, if at all there is a forest fire in the high altitude regions, or the middle altitude regions rather, of these mountains, there is a significant amount of persistence and a widespreading nature that this fire has because of the oil secreted by these particular trees. Okay? Then, further higher that you go, you will find temperate grasslands are present. For example, in the region of Western Himalayas, you'll find a lot of these temperate grasslands. And these temperate grasslands we have studied are referred to as, what are these temperate grasslands in the region of Western Himalayas known as? Let me know. Good. Very good. Pranay. So, for example, you have the Bugyals in the region of Middle Himalayas, in the region of Uttarakhand, in the region of Himachal. So that is where you have the presence and the persistence of Bugyals. Okay, these are an example of the seasonal temperate grasslands that you will find in the region of Middle Himalayas. Then further higher up, alpine forests, significant conifers, pastures, and then you have tundra vegetation at very high altitude in the form of mosses and lichens. In these forest, trees are how increase very quickly. trees increase very quickly in terms of their size or their numbers? So not all the conifers grow very quickly. Generally, few of the conifers you will find that because they will withstand the kind of the harsh winter condition, their height is limited. They won't grow beyond a height. Okay. So generally on top of the hills that you will find the conifers which are growing, they won't grow beyond a height because of the factors of the wind. That is a controlling agent. But in these hills, you'll find one tree type which is very quickly and very fast growing. And that is a species which doesn't originally belong to India. That is the species of eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is a kind of an invasive alien species of tree which had been introduced by the British originally from the region of Australia, introduced in India. Now they start growing very, very quickly and they grow very tall, due to which the other coniferous trees that are present in the region, they get impacted. Their growth level gets impacted. And moreover, many of these conifer trees, as soon as there is a warmer season which comes ahead, that is their growing season. That is why they suddenly grow tall. And again, when the cold winter season comes in, the growth stalls. There is no growth during the cold winter season. Again, when the dry season comes in, they will grow in spurts. Okay. In JNK and Ladakh, no, in Ladakh is a dry area. There you won't find these forests. In Jammu Kashmir, you will find this. In Himachal Pradesh, you will find these forests. In Uttarakhand, in the region of Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, you will find a lot of these forests. Now, when we talk about the mountains of the southern part of the country, they are smaller in height, much more smaller in height. And there the temperature overall across the year is still slightly higher as compared to the mighty Himalayas. So that is where we come across the forests to be found across the region of Western Ghats, Vindhyas, and the region of Nilgiris. What are these forests? Let us try to understand them. So in this situation, the southern mountain forests, there you will find a special kind of vegetation, somewhat like this. Look at the lush green. Right in between the forests, you will find lush green grasses also. And here you will also find a kind of a forest, temperate evergreen forest is also something that you will find. These are referred to as sholai in the Tamil language, and from there the term has been taken, that is sholas. So you will come across various different species across the southern part of the country which are dependent on the sholas. For example, you have the bison population in the Nilgiris. They are dependent on sholas. For example, you have the Nilgiri tar, the state animal of Tamil Nadu, that is dependent on sholas. So that is where the sholas, they are very relevant for the southern part of the country, and it is derived from the term sholai in Tamil. Okay, that is where it is derived from. Here you will come across species such as magnolia, laurel, cinchona, wattle. These are the types of species that you come across. And typically, many portions of the southern mountain forest, because of the factors that I have told you, they also are nowadays found to be dominated by eucalyptus trees. So eucalyptus is one of those that you will find in major dominance in the southern part of the country. It was in the southern part, in the region around Ooty, where for the first time, I hope we are aware of the fact that presently Ooty is celebrating its 200 years since the inception of that town, the kind of settling of that particular region. 200 years have happened. So it was 200 years back, roughly, where eucalyptus was introduced in the region of the Nilgiris. And these regions now have become very predominated by this kind of eucalyptus plants. Now, that eucalyptus plant is impacting the growth of other kind of trees in the region, because originally eucalyptus was introduced for a particular reason. It was introduced because it could absorb a lot of moisture and a lot of dampness from all around. And the region of the Nilgiris, they were not inhabited significantly at that point of time, other than the local tribes and the local population. Because It was considered to be very damp and moist throughout the year because of rainfall, obviously. And because of that dampness, you had prevalence of diseases like malaria. And malaria at that point of time did not have much of a cure. So people would be very afraid to venture into these hilly areas and into these mountainous areas. And these were occupied by the local tribes. You have the Todas and you have, for example, Irulas. They would basically dominate the entire region. It was only when the British started introducing the cultivation of tea in many of the regions, they started introducing the eucalyptus trees where the dampness level was reduced. But in that process, that also meant that the local population of the trees, they were getting impacted. So the local population which required a level of dampness, they were getting impacted by that. So that is the case of southern montane forests. Okay. Now, we have the littoral and the swamp forests. Now, littoral and swamp forest, these are basically to be found across the coastal areas of the country, across the island regions of the country, and also across the ponds and lakes which you find across the country. So, the regional spread, if you think about it, regional spread. So, here, all the coastal areas, all the coastal states rather, then islands that we have. Then, other than that, you will also find it in the interior areas where you have inland lakes. For example, Sambar Lake. Where is Sambar Lake situated? Where is it that we have Sambar Lake in India? Good. It is in Rajasthan. Okay, Sambar Lake is situated in Rajasthan. Where is it that we have Vular Lake? Where is Vular Lake situated across the country? In which part of the country do we have the presence of Vular Lake? Very good. In the region of Jammu and Kashmir. Good, Vivek. So these are the regions where you'll find them. Also, you will find them in the regions of the coastal lakes, the saltwater lakes, for example, across Chilika, Pulicat, etc. Even sometimes on the sides of large reservoirs, very large reservoirs. In that case, you will find in between the reservoirs, you will also find the presence of these swamp forests. So, large reservoirs created by dams. Example, you have, for example, Hirakud Dam. Okay, so around these also, you'll find these kinds of forests. Now, these forests typically they are adapted to be growing in saturated water condition where water is present significantly, and they can grow in submerged condition as well. Now, that is a unique quality that you will not come across any other kind of trees. For example, the other kind of trees that you have, so those trees, wherever they come across saturated water or submerged condition, immediately the roots will rot and they will die. But these type of trees, many of them in the variety of mangroves, they undergo various different kinds of adaptations. For example, they will have adventitious roots, they will have pneumatophores in the roots, they will go for viviparous method of reproduction. So all these adaptations that they go for, that allows them to grow in these stagnant and stagnating water conditions. So here you will find beach forest, tidal forest right at the coastline, right at the shoreline, right? And then also freshwater swamp forest, for example, across Wooler Lake, across reservoirs. So there you will find freshwater reservoirs, etc. So there you will find littoral and swamp forest. Okay. Breathing roots, yes, sort of breathing roots. See, all the roots, they will require some amount of oxygen supply. They will be required to have that oxygen supply. Why? In order to have a particular growth. Now, in this case, obviously, the roots won't get that direct oxygen supply. That is why they go for modification, where you'll find some of the roots emerging above water itself so that they can get the supply of air directly. Okay. So, about the adaptations of it, that what are the adaptations that the mangroves go for? That will be covered in the portion of environment. As I told you earlier, you had the situation where biogeography was treated as a portion of geography itself separately. And up till 2013, candidates would be required to study this portion along with the factors of some basics about what is environment, what is ecology, what is productivity of organic matter, etc. And questions would be basically restricted to that. From 2014 onwards, UPSC suddenly increased the focus in these areas. And from 2014 onwards, you came across a situation where around 10 to 15 questions directly would appear from the portion of environment ecology. It is then that it was treated, and this portion of biogeography was treated as a separate subject altogether. So, all these examples we will study and you will study in the portion of environment. Example of mangroves, you have Sundari tree. Right. Sundari tree. It is from this Sundari tree that the name Sundarbans has been associated. Sundarbans means a forest of Sundari tree. So Sundari tree is an example of, prevalent example of mangroves that you will come across. Okay. Now, that basically marks the total different types of forests that we have. Okay, just the basic information of the two types of forest, the regions where they can be found, and the example of certain species. Just these basic facts will be more than sufficient for your examination. Okay. Now we come across the status of forest report in India. So basically, just to give you a brief background of it, it was in the year 1988 when India came up with its national forest policy. National forest policy. That was in the year 1988. Now, this forest policy, basically, the aim was to increase the green cover, the forested cover of the country, and take it to somewhere around 33%. Increase the green cover to 33% of the country. That was the aim which was set. Now, how do you measure your progress? That whether you have managed to increase that green cover or not. How do you measure that progress? So it is for that purposes that you had the periodic or the biennial circulation of this report, that is the India State of Forest Report. Now, from this particular portion, the first sentence itself, you can have a couple of statements framed in a prelim. For example, you can have a statement that this report is generated annually. It is not. It is generated every 2 years. It is a biennial exercise. For example, you can have another statement that which organization publishes this forest report? It is published by Forest Survey of India. So that is basically the status of forests that you have in the country. Now, here, first of all, what is done is that with the help of a satellite image, you go for a mapping of the green cover, that which areas have how much amount of green cover. And there you take a look in the form of the canopy, because from above, from the satellite view, you will not be able to take a look at the branches and the trunk and the roots of the tree, obviously. So you get an idea about the canopy cover, how dense a particular region is filled with the canopy. So for example, let's suppose an area like this has got the presence of these trees. Okay. Now, when you take a look at these trees from above, only the canopy will be visible. The bottom portion of the trees won't be visible. Okay. So there, a look is taken into the canopy cover. And accordingly, based on the canopy cover, the tree or the type of forest is basically distinguished. Here, if the canopy cover in a region, let's say in this area, the canopy cover occupies more than 70% of that area, it will be regarded as a very dense forest. If, let's say, the canopy cover is between 40% to 70% of the area, it will be referred to as moderately dense. If the canopy cover is even less than that, then you have an open forest. So that is basically what is done in the case of classification of the forest. So this is the forest report of 2019. 2021 forest report was released last year in January, that is 2022. So here we will get an idea about what to look for, so that you have an idea about when this appears in the next year, that is 2023 forest report comes out, what to concentrate upon. So concentrate, for example, what is the proportion of very dense forest. Here, canopy cover is the highest, moderately dense forest, open forest. All of this classification is done based upon the canopy cover. After that, you arrive at the total forest cover. And then you take the concept of a tree cover. And then you arrive at the total green area, including the tree cover and the forest cover. So what is the difference between a forest cover and what is the difference when we talk about tree cover? Both of these are trees after all. So here, understand, think about it. Let's suppose in your city, you will have some or the other region, or in whichever town or city or whichever area of the country you are living in, you will invariably come across a particular stretch of land, let's say, which has got a lot of trees there, lot of population of trees. Now you cannot regard that as a forest straight away, can you? So the classification into forest land is ideally done by the state government. And there, it is not as if a small patch of 5 trees will be classified as a forest. If you have a tree cover greater than 1 hectare in terms of area, and if it is classified as a reserved area by the state government, then you will regard it as a forest. Otherwise, it is regarded as a tree cover. Okay, so tree cover and forest cover, the difference is, if you have the tree population in less than an area of 1 hectare, it is tree cover. In areas where they have an aerial coverage of greater than 1 hectare designated by the state government as a reserved area or a forest, that is the case of a forest cover. So this is the classification of the types of forest based upon the canopy, density of canopy. So canopy density of 70% and above, you will come across very dense forest. Canopy cover of 40 to 70%, moderately dense forest. Canopy cover of 10% to 40%, observe, this is regarded as an open forest, the kind of forest that you find in central India, in the region around Telangana, in the region around eastern Maharashtra, in the region around Punjab, Haryana. So that is where you have open forest. And then if the canopy cover is less than 10%, then it is a scrub land. it is not even considered as a forest in that case, because if you have less than 10% of canopy cover, means the trees are almost non-existent, means mostly you will have these small scrubs and herbs which are going to be dominant there. So here, let us take a look at the forest report of 2021, and let us take a look at few of the salient features in this case. So for example, the list of top 5 states in terms of largest forest area: Madhya Pradesh. Area, aerial coverage of the forest is largest in the case of Madhya Pradesh, Arunachal, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, and then you have Maharashtra. Okay, so there's a difference between percentage covered and the area covered. So if you take a look at the forest cover as percentage of total geographical area, you have the highest dominance in Mizoram, where 85%, almost 84.5% of the land is covered with forest. Arunachal Pradesh, for example, almost 80% of the land is covered with forest. Meghalaya, 76% of the land is covered with forest. So these are basically examples of the names of the states which have the highest geographical percentage area in terms of forest, and these are the states with largest area in absolute terms covered under forest. Now, this is basically few of the observations, salient points, salient features of state of forest report. So basically, total forest and tree cover of the country is 80.9 million hectares. And basically, out of that, 24.62 is the geographical coverage of the country. And as compared to the previous assessment or the previous report, there has been an increase of 2200 square kilometer of the total forest and tree cover, out of which the forest cover has increased by 1540 square kilometer, tree cover has increased by 721 square kilometer. So overall, as compared to 2019 survey, this forest cover in India, a forest and tree cover in India, has increased by almost 2200 square kilometer. And overall, this marks an increase of 0.4%. So if you take a look at the 2019, it was close to around 24.56%. This has come closer to around 24.8%. Generally, around that, closer to 25% is where the number lies. And the 5 states with the largest increase in forest area, where the forest area has increased considerably as per the last survey: Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Odisha, Karnataka, Jharkhand. These are the states where there has been a large increase in forest area. Then, furthermore, other important highlights: mangrove cover in the country has increased by around 17 square kilometer. Bamboo forests, they have registered a massive jump of around 26% from the previous forest. And even very dense forest, they have increased by close to around 500 square kilometer. That is largely because of the conservation measures which have been carried out. Nearly 17 states have achieved the target of 33% of the area under forest, but many of the states are still to come in that region. Now, from here, what kind of question can be framed? I'll give you a practice question that you can write in your own very good time whenever you have the time. So I'll give you a practice question from this. So here, the type of question that can be framed is: analyze the classification of the forests in terms of canopy cover, or Simply put, analyze the classification of forest. Here you have to write that how it is classified into very dense and moderately dense. Discuss the changes and trends in the forest cover of the country as indicated by the state of forest report. Okay, so these kinds of questions can be framed, and once you come across these questions, you know how to introduce. I hope we have understood that. So in the introduction, you will talk about the basic fact that India has around 25% of the land covered under forest. The classification, and India has got the categorization of very dense forest, moderately dense forest, as well as open forest spread in various geographical regions of the country. And then after that, you can initiate the body portion by writing that what this forest survey report is, when it is released, and what are the trends indicated and the salient features that have been highlighted here. All these salient features you can write, complete the answer. Okay. Is it desirable for increase in forest cover in largest population country of the planet? Absolutely yes. Forest cover is very essential. In India, now let us take a few questions, previous year questions. In India, in which of one of the following types of forest is teak a dominant tree species? Where is it that you will find the presence of teak? Let me know. Yes, Vishwa, correct. Incorrect, Vivek. Good. Majority of you have given the correct answer in this case. That is the tropical moist deciduous forest. That is where you will find the forest types such as, or the tree types such as teak, sal, sisam, mahua, all of these, sandalwood, you'll find in the moist deciduous region. Good. Now, this was a question which was controversial because the answers that the students gave, UPSC did not agree to that, and UPSC had got its different inference, but it makes sense also. Let us take a look at this question. Which of the following regions of India has a combination of mangrove, evergreen, and deciduous forest? All of these are to be found in which region of the country? Now, as is the case in many of the times of prelims examination, when you mark an answer, you basically use all your intellect to prove that the answer is right and UPSC is wrong. Right. But then this is a particular examination where you cannot fight off with the enemy, that is UPSC. So UPSC, when it comes up with a solution, that is where it is the final one. So let me see here if we have the same. Good. Very good. Majority of you have given the correct answer, and that is the correct answer which even UPSC adhered to. Now, in this year, the controversy was that many of the students had even marked southwestern Bengal, but the inference made by it proved it to be incorrect. Let us analyze why the other statements are incorrect. North coastal Andhra Pradesh. Now, in north coastal Andhra Pradesh, you might find mangrove, you might find dry deciduous, but you will never find evergreen. So this is incorrect. Southwestern Bengal. Now, it is not southern West Bengal. It is southwestern Bengal. Now, southwestern Bengal is where? Which shares its boundary with the region of Odisha and Jharkhand. That is the southwestern part of Bengal. Had it been southern West Bengal, it is different. Southwestern Bengal will be the one sharing the boundary with Jharkhand and Odisha. There you will not come across mangrove forest. You will even not come across evergreen. You will come across moist deciduous. So this is also incorrect. South coastal forest, again, no evergreen forest to be found. This also becoming incorrect. So the correct answer will be Andaman Nicobar Island. Okay. Now, after this, we'll come to the portion of soil and associated problems, where we'll talk about the type of soil that we have across the country, the various issues of soil degradation, soil erosion, how is it that you conserve soil, how is it that in some regions soil degradation is leading to desertification. All that factor we'll come to, but we'll do that after the break. So we take a break right now for 15 minutes and we come back and then we take a look at it. Okay. First question is, where is it that teak is found? Teak is basically a tropical moist deciduous tree. So teak, sal, sesame, mawa, sandalwood, that is what you find in tropical moist deciduous. Okay, Roshan? Bikaner, yes, Bikaner, the entire Shekhawati region of Rajasthan, the portion of Haryana, you'll find scrubland. Okay, so let's take a break and let's be back in around 15 minutes. A confirmation about the audio, please. If the audio is clear and available, kindly confirm the same. Thank you. So now we start the discussion about soil and the associated problems. Now here we are going to study about the types of soil, its distribution across the country. And when we say the distribution of soil, in which part of the country, which kind of soil types are to be found, their basic properties need to be understood. And also, you have to understand the problems that, for example, soil erosion. Why is it that soil erosion happens? Why is it that in certain areas soil degradation is observed? What is soil degradation? What is desertification? And then eventually, once we know about the problems, we also get an idea about how is it that we can conserve and preserve soil. This is very, very important in order to understand the portion of agriculture. So many of the times we attack the portion of agriculture separately. But here, the understanding of this, if it has been taken into consideration, then agriculture is a follow-on process. So for this, what is relevant for the prelims is basically you will get the portions of regional distribution of soil, regional distribution of soil. Also, we get areas from the portions of the basic properties of soil. Okay. And for the mains, you can expect questions to be coming from the regions of soil erosion, soil degradation. Also, you can expect question from the area of soil conservation. But before that, degradation to desertification, how degradation can lead to desertification of an area, and then also measures of conservation of soil. Okay. These are the regions and the portions from which you can always expect a question to be asked. Now, ideally, I would suggest here that, as in the case of the forest, I had suggested that look at that particular portion when you are studying that portion. Please try to approach that portion only after you have understood the rainfall distribution. In this portion, I would suggest to you a humble suggestion that kindly, when you are revising, when you are approaching this topic on your own, kindly look at this topic after you have understood the physiographic division of the country. So once you have understood the physiographical divisions of India, after that, you can approach it. The understanding will be much deeper and much clearer for that sake. Now here, let us initiate the discussion for soil. So first of all, soil is something that we encounter in our day-to-day lives, right? We encounter soil on a day-to-day basis, on a kind of a daily basis. We encounter the various different types of soil that we have, soil types, and everywhere around us we find a layer of soil which is in existence. Now here, when we talk about that soil, how is it that the soil is created? How is it that the soil is formed? So soil is generally created as a result of the weathering which occurs in these rocks. Only after that, you have the soil which is formed. So in an area, if you take a look at the formation of soil, in an area, you might have a rocky region, a region which is dominated by large rocks, for example. Now, over a period of time, this rock will undergo a kind of a weathering. And when weathering will happen, the top portion of the rock, that is the one which gets disintegrated first. So that is where there might be cracks which develop here. And disintegration of the rocks might happen in the top layer. Okay. Now, this disintegration in itself will take hundreds of and thousands of years. This in itself will take around hundreds and thousands of years. Sometimes even it will take few thousand years altogether. Now, once that has disintegrated, then the further top portions, they shall again undergo further breaking, further disintegration into many smaller components. Okay. And like that, even the top portions after that, they will undergo further disintegration. So as a result of the process, the entire process, on top of it, you will find very fine particles, very small particles that we refer to as topsoil. Underneath it, you will find slightly larger particles in existence, which have undergone slightly lesser amount of weathering. And then slowly and steadily, as you go deeper, you will find the larger rock layers. And if eventually you will find the unweathered parent rock. So when we talk about the parent rock, so there it is that particular rock, the disintegration of which has led to the formation and the creation of soil in the first place. That is what is regarded as the parent rock material. Now, soil is considered to be a life-giving source. It consists of large amount of biodiversity which lives in that. For example, it is always said that if you take 1 teaspoonful of soil, it will consist of as many organisms, as many species as you might find in a particular large grassland, for example. Because each of these portions of soil, they will have many small microorganisms, worms, insects. All of these will be dominating the soil. And that is what makes the soil very fertile. It is that particular ability of the soil to consist such large amount of biodiversity and the ability to support plant growth. That is why we come across significant amount of plant growth in various parts of the world. Imagine if the soil would not have been present, plant growth would have been inhibited. Plant growth would have come to a stop. And if you don't have the growth of the plants, what will the herbivores consume? So you won't have the herbivores. If you don't have the herbivores, what is it that the carnivores will consume? So like that, the entire ecology and the entire biosphere will crumble in the absence of soil. So that is why when you have soil erosion or the removal of top layer of the soil, it is so very disastrous in general. Okay. Now it is a living system and it is considered to be a renewable natural resource because overall this soil can be reformed by the disintegration of the rocks, etc. It can again reform, but that process of formation of the soil in itself is so prolonged, it will take hundreds and thousands of years, maybe millions of years, that many of the times an area which is degraded and the topsoil has been taken away, that is devoid of biodiversity for a considerably very long period of time. So that is why we need to conserve soil, but we will be able to conserve soil only after we are able to understand it in significant proportion. Now you have various different factors which are instrumental, which are important in the entire process of formation of the soil. So when we take a look at the factors which contribute to the formation of the soil, we come across the basics such as parent rock or bedrock, the rock from which the soil has been formed. Now, the parent rock is very essential for the mineral composition of the soil itself. For example, if the parent rock is igneous in nature, the soil which is formed as a result of the disintegration of that igneous rock, do you think it will have organic component in it, or do you think it will be devoid of organic component? What do you think will be the circumstance in that case? Let me know. Good, Utkarsh. Very good. So in that case, generally you will find that it will be devoid of the organic component, right? So when you have an igneous rock which is leading to the formation of the soil, because the igneous rocks, they don't have the presence of organic component, the soil created as a result of that will also not have the presence of organic component. The minerals present in the parent rock, they will be found in the soil as well. So this parent rock is very, very important for the formation of soil. Example, take the case of black soil. Now that black soil will be created as a result of weathering of which kind of rock? Which rock leads to the formation of black soil? Weathering of flood basalt. So in the case of basaltic rocks, that is where you come across this particular kind of soil. Okay, so weathering of flood basalt. Then that, in which area of the country do we find the presence of flood basalt? In the region of Deccan Traps. Found in Deccan Traps. Okay, it is to be found to be present in Deccan Traps. Then again, when we talk about the influence of climate, climate is not only about temperature. Climate, when we talk about it, is also inclusive of the amount of rainfall which occurs in an area. Now, this climatic condition can influence the rate of weathering, whether the weathering is happening at a faster rate or whether this entire process of weathering is happening at a slow pace. So, based on that, we get an idea about what is the rate of soil formation. So, influences the rate of weathering. For example, when we talk about temperate regions of the world, where the temperature is moderate throughout the year, now in those areas, the rate of weathering is not very quick. But when we talk about tropical areas, particularly those which also end up receiving rainfall, there you have substantial temperature variation happening through the different parts of the year. And it is in those areas that you will come across an accelerated rate of weathering. So, example, moist tropical areas or humid tropical areas, they undertake or experience an accelerated rate of weathering. Okay, right? Just a moment, just a couple of moments. Okay. So, by the way, this is just to inform you that today we shall be following the Sunday timings because the sessions have started from 10 a.m. in the morning. So we shall be following the Sunday timings today. So many of you would be absolutely famished by now, starving by now. So we will have a lunch break at 1. Okay, so we'll have a lunch break from 1 to 2. And then again, we will have that snack break from around 5 to 5:30. I hope that works for you guys as well. Okay, so now coming back to it. So the climatic conditions of a region, they influence the rate of weathering which is experienced in any particular area. Whether the rate of weathering is higher or lower, that in a way contributes to the rate at which the soil is getting created. So that is an important factor. Then we have the availability of vegetation and other forms of life. Now, wherever you have vegetation, soil generally does have the presence of organic components. Wherever you come across the presence of vegetation, soil generally will be having the organic components. So this controls the presence of organic components. Okay. So whenever you have the presence of organic component in the soil, soil is considered to be fertile. Now, whenever, and you would have heard about this term fertile soil, infertile soil, significant number of times. So, what constitutes the term when you hear about the term fertility and fertile soil? What should be present when we talk about fertile soil? So, fertile soil or the soil which is fertile is the one which will be able to support a lot of plant growth. That is what is fertile. So, it should be able to support a lot of plant growth, isn't it? So for that, what needs to be there? You need the presence of organic compounds, organic content. Then the soil should have the natural ability to retain moisture. So moisture retention capacity should be there because the roots will require that moisture for growth. So moisture retention capacity. Then the soil should also be able to hold air between the particles because the roots have very tiny nodules which require the availability of oxygen and interaction with oxygen. So air retention capacity. Air retention capacity is also important. Then after that, you also need certain other minerals or macronutrients. Macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. So, what are also referred to as N, P, and K. So, together, these are referred to as NPK. Okay. So, a soil is considered fertile when it is when it has got the ability to support a lot of vegetation present. And vegetation or plant growth will be supported if the soil has got these characteristics. Now, moisture retention capacity and air retention capacity. Let me give you two samples or two examples of soil. and let me know in which of them moisture retention and air retention capacity will be higher. If, let's say, in the first soil type, you have fine particles, very fine particles. You have, let's say, the presence of very fine particles. Okay. And in the second one, you have larger particles, larger grains. Coarse grains and fine grains. So if I ask you, out of sample A and sample B, which will have a better air retention and which will be able to hold air significantly amongst itself, which will be able to hold water without the water seeping to the lower layers. Out of A and B, which of them do you think will be able to hold air and moisture better? Very good. Vivek, Nitin, very good. Aarti, correct. Pranay, incorrect. Utkarsh, correct. So, generally, you will come across the situation. Dhanya, also correct. Generally, you will come across a situation where whenever you have fine grained particles, wherever you have fine grained particles, they will have the ability to absorb moisture, hold moisture sufficiently, retain moisture, and also have the availability of air. So, fine grained will have greater air and moisture retention capacity. Retention. Hence, generally, you will come across the fine grained soil generally considered to be very fertile. It is generally considered to be very, very and significantly fertile for that matter. So, fertile soil will be the one where very fine grains are present. Now, fine grains will be present when a lot of weathering has been already carried out, when the complete stage of breakdown has happened, when all the larger grains are reduced to very, very fine and smaller particles, only then will you come across the fine grain. So, here, this also helps us understand that how, when we talk about the factors influencing the formation of the soil, how each of these individual factors will also contribute to the fertility of the soil that is formed. So, time is a major factor. Now, if you have a soil which has taken a larger time to form, in general circumstances, you will find the presence of very minute and fine grains in that region. Okay, so wherever you come across significant amount of weathering, that is where fertile soil is created. So, greater the time taken, more fine grained the soil will be, and hence it will be very fertile. Greater the time taken, greater the time consumed, more fine grained particles or more fine grained soil, which impacts fertility. Okay, then actions of running water, wind, glaciers, all these actions that we studied in the portion of geomorphology, if you recall, we had studied in the fifth module about the erosional action of the running water, of the wind, and the glaciers. Now, all of these will degrade the rocks, carry out the portions from the various different parts of the rocks, and will end up depositing them as sediments. So wherever you have greater deposit, you will naturally find the presence of fine grained and nutritious soil, in the sense that it will be very rich in minerals as well. So here, this impacts the deposits, and deposits are generally fertile soil. Deposits are very fertile. Why? Because these will consist of minerals and nutrients that are present in various types of rocks. And all these minerals are very essential for the formation of, or the support of, growth of plants in general. Then, activities of decomposers. Decomposers are those set of species which work on degradation of organic matter. Maybe a dried leaf, maybe a dead branch. All of this is worked upon by the decomposer. So when we talk about activities of decomposers, they control and contribute to the organic content. Organic content of the soil is what is also regarded as humus. The dark brown kind of substance that you find in the soil, that is what is humus. So that is the organic component which you find. Then, other than that, the chemical and organic changes which take place in the soil, they are also equally important in order to contribute to the fertility in general. So these are the various factors which lead to or contribute to the formation of soil in general. Okay, these are the various factors which are involved. Now, we come to the layers of soil. Now, generally, if in general you would have experienced that, as in any area, if you would have observed digging activities to be carried out, any region which is dug up, you will find that after a particular depth, larger stones they start appearing. And if the digging is carried out furthermore, you have even larger stones till you hit the rock bed. And that rock bed has actually disintegrated to form all these layers above. So that is what is referred to as the soil profile. The vertical cross-sectional layering of the soil is referred to as the soil profile. Okay. Now the topsoil or the upper soil layer is the one which will consist of minerals, humus, that is the organic component, etc. This is the most fertile layer. Most fertile layer of soil. Okay, that is the most fertile layer of the soil that you will come across. And underneath it, you will find larger particles, very large coarse grains. So they will not have the ability to absorb moisture and retain air within them. Then slowly and steadily, as you go to the lower extent, you will come across unweathered parent bedrock. This unweathered parent bedrock has disintegrated to form the topsoil. Okay, so that is why the topsoil generally, when you will come across, so there you will find traces of and the mineral dominance and the mineral composition of the unweathered parent rock. However, this is to be observed in some soil types. When we talk about certain soils which, let's say, are formed as a result of deposit, now those depositional soils, they will not have the characteristic of the unweathered parent rock. Right? For example, let's suppose a river is moving and originating from the Himalayas. It is eroding substances from the region of the Himalayan mountains. As it comes down to the region of the plains, let's suppose it deposits it in the floodplains of the river. Now, the type of parent rock that you will find in these floodplains, that will be very distinct from the case of the deposits, the characteristic of the deposits, because the deposits have been carried from somewhere altogether very different. So this layering is not representative in case of depositional soils. Depositional soil, for example, you have the alluvial soil. Example, if I can write the example somewhere else. So here, the example I will write here. Example, alluvial soil. Characteristics or nature of alluvial soil is very distinct from the parent rock. To be found in the region. To be found in a region. That is where you'll find the presence of this alluvial soil, where the properties, now these alluvial soil have been carried from somewhere else, deposited somewhere else. So that is what is also referred to as azonal soil. That this is not a kind of a zonation that in that region only the soil formation has taken place. So it is a kind of an azonal soil. Mostly the parent rocks are igneous or metamorphic in majority of the cases. Okay. Now we come to the classification of soil. Now, India has got large variety of soil types which are present. Overall, there are 8 different varieties of soil types that you will find in the country. Now, please don't end up concentrating on each and every one and learning each and every one, because overall you need to understand what these soil types are. But for the point of view of your examination, 4 types of soil are relevant. Important of them. 4 types of soils you will find to be relevant and to be asked in the exams. One is alluvial soil. Then you have black soil. Then you have red and yellow soil. And then you will have the presence of even laterite soil. So these are the types of soil that one should concentrate upon from the point of view of examination. Okay. Questions in the prelims are generally formed from these particular regions. Now here, India, because it has got a very varied physiography, different topographical features in different parts of the country. So obviously the soil which will be created will also have different mineral presence in various parts. Now overall, when we think about it, the soil in India, almost all the soil types that you come across the country, that is poor in nitrogen. Almost all the soil types are very poor in nitrogen. And why is it? Why is it that it is poor in nitrogen? Very good. That is because even though nitrogen is the predominant gas that you find in the region of atmosphere, overall, you will observe that nitrogen in the atmosphere is inert in nature. It is non-reactive in nature. And when that is non-reactive in nature, means what? Means it will not form nitrates in the various different rocks. And it is these rocks which will disintegrate to form soil. So if you don't have the presence of nitrates in the rocks, obviously the soil which is created will also be devoid of nitrogen. That is why majority of all soil types across the globe, they are very, very poor in nitrogen. So in order to augment that nitrogen presence and nitrogen content, that is why you end up supplying the fertilizers to enhance the level of nitrogen. And which is the fertilizer that you provide to enhance or increase the amount of nitrogen? Urea. Very good. So you apply urea in order to augment. Now, ideally for the NPK, the nitrogen, potash, or nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, it is said that it should be applied in the ratio of 4:2:1. That means for every 1 unit of potash that you are adding, you should add 2 units of phosphate and 4 units of nitrogen or urea. So that is the advisable quantity of augmentation of fertility. However, this is largely not followed across the parts of the country because of the basic reason that many of these fertilizers, they are available at very subsidized rate, lack of information and awareness about the role of these fertilizers in the soil, due to which there is a huge amount of mismatch in what fertilizer we are applying at what proportion, which leads to complications in the soil health, and in the long run the soil gets degraded. Now let us take a look at the types of soil. So here, when we take a look at the types of soil, I will also help you understand the regional spread, and thereby you will be able to draw the map of the country very easily about these major four types of soil and their regional spread. So starting with the alluvial soil. Now alluvial soil is formed as a result of deposits, right? In India, the deposits that are dominated are basically the river deposits, the fluvial deposits. So in India, where is it that you will find the river deposits? In the region of the northern plains, in some parts of Rajasthan, in some parts of Gujarat, all across the coastal plains, that is the eastern coastal plain quite significantly, and narrow portions of western coastal plain, significantly extending even into the region of the Brahmaputra plain. So in all these areas, you find the river deposits to be in existence. That is where you'll find the alluvial soil also. Overall, the spread of alluvial soil covers around 40% of the total area of the country. Now, this alluvial soil is very, very fertile. It is very fertile. Now, we had seen earlier in the last week that this alluvial soil is also subdivided into two types. You have the older alluvium and the newer alluvium. So you have the older alluvium, and older alluvium is referred to as Bhangar. Very good. And the newer alluvium is referred to as Khadar. So out of these two, we do know that it is Bhangar which is less fertile and Khadar which is more fertile. Khadar will have fine grains and it will be very much more fertile, and Khadar will be able to support a wide variety of vegetation and crops, ranging from rice to jute to any of the crops that you can think about. That is something which you will be able to observe to be growing in the region of Khadar. Whereas the older alluvium, that is Bhangar, generally you will find certain crops such as pulses, maize, millet, certain kinds of oil seeds, only they can grow in the region of Khadar. Okay, so The entire northern plains, they are made up of alluvial soil, and they extend to Rajasthan, Gujarat through a very narrow corridor. Eastern coastal plains, particularly in the deltas of Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna, and Kaveri, all these areas, you will find the presence of very fertile alluvial soil. Now, these are depositional soils. These are deposited. They are transported over a large distance by these agents of nature. And here, then they form these deposits. According to the age, you have older alluvium, that is Bhangar, and the newer alluvium, that is Khadar. And Khadar will be more fertile. Why will it be more fertile? Because here, the deposits are replenished every year. Deposits and mineral component is replenished every year. Okay. That is why you will come across a situation where it is very fertile. Whereas the older alluvium, the deposits have happened long time back, maybe 50, 100 years back, maybe 150 years back, maybe even more than that. So that means this is less fertile. Less fertile. And we have also seen last week that when we talk about these less fertile soils, oftentimes these will consist of unconsolidated larger rock fragments. And that is what we refer to as conchers. And that is where these conchers, they will in a way impact the soil's ability to retain air and moisture. So even despite being less fertile, it can still support the growth of maize, pulses, oil seeds, etc. Then after that, here, it is rich in potash, phosphoric acid, and lime. It is poor in nitrogen. Lime has got calcium concentration in it. And it is this calcium concentration which allows the formation of conchers in the older alluvium. So observe the areas. First of all, at each of these regions of the soil, observe the area. And guys, please understand, once that you understand the trend, that where which kind of soil is found and why that kind of a soil is found in that region, you will never forget it. You will be able to draw it very easily. You'll come across a host of your competitors and students and candidates who spend a lot of time mastering this distribution of soil. They've rote learn this distribution of soil. You don't have to rote learn it. You just have to be mindful of how that has been created. As long as you are mindful, for example, when we talk about alluvial soil formed by the deposits of the rivers Indo-Gangetic and the Brahmaputra plain, also by the large deltas here by Mahanadi, right? Then here by Godavari, Krishna, Kaveri, Pennar, all of these, they form that alluvial soil region, very fertile alluvial soil region. Across the western coastal plain, observe that it is lacking. Why? Because here you don't have the presence of deltas. Rather, here you will only find the presence of estuaries. So these are the regions of fertile alluvial soil. So it is very ideal for the growth of sugarcane, paddy, that is rice, wheat, and other cereal and pulse crops. And due to the high level of fertility, regions of alluvial soil are intensively cultivated, and also they have a very high density of population also. Why? Because a lot of people, they live in that region in order to carry out the process of cultivation, farming. So a lot of people who live in that region, they carry out the process of cultivation in small farmlands. That is why all the plain regions across the world, wherever you will find a lot of these alluvial soil deposits, all of them are going to be very, very densely populated. Even in India, if you take a look at the population spread of India, which we will take a look at tomorrow, even in India, you will observe that these are the regions which have a very high density of population associated. a high density of population which can be ascribed, okay, in all these areas. Because cultivation provides the economic opportunity that the people can capitalize upon. Then, after that, we come across the layer of black soil. This is the region which has got black soil. Now, black soil in itself is created as a result of disintegration of basaltic rocks. Basaltic rocks which came upon the surface in our case when you had a significant amount of eruption over the region of Deccan Traps, the present day region of Deccan Traps, where it was the eruption caused due to a volcanic hotspot in the Reunion Islands. So this is formed as a result of disintegration or weathering. Disintegration of basaltic rocks. So here, as you can see, the role of the parent rock, the mineral presence of the parent rock is very instrumental in the type of soil that is created. Now, these black soil regions, obviously, if we know the regions where you will find the presence of, let's say, in all those areas where we've come across or we find the presence of the Deccan Traps or the basaltic rock, those are the areas where you will find the presence of black soil also. Now, this black soil has got very fine grains. If ever you have held black soil in your hand, if let's say you would have tried to compress it, you will observe it has got that kind of a clay texture where it takes the shape that you want to give it up. It has got very, very fine grains, means it has got a very high moisture retention capacity. That means here, if let's say this region has received rainfall, it will be able to sustain crop for a very long period of time without the requirement of a specific method of irrigation. So that is why this is very ideal for the growth of cotton. And that is why it is also referred to as a black cotton soil. Does not mean that cotton will not grow in other regions. Cotton will also grow in the case of alluvial soil. But in the region of black soil, cotton is very predominant. That is why it is also referred to as the black cotton soil. Now, because here you'll find the presence of very fine particles. You will generally come across the presence of these very fine particles. The presence of fine particles virtually means what? It basically means, let's say, you have availability of moisture in this region. Some moisture, some droplets of water are in existence here. Now, immediately you will observe that all the soil particles, they will stick around, right? They will try to retain water within the particles. So all of this will start coagulating, will start sticking around this soil, all of them. And when they will stick around, what will happen? On top, you will observe that as the soil or the portions of the soil, as they are trying to come closer to each other around that moisture, they will open up large cracks on the surface. Cracks will be opened up on the surface. Open up when the moisture is very less, as the soil particles try to stick around the last ounce of moisture available, or of moisture available. Now, when these cracks open up, that means what? That means through these cracks now, air can penetrate into the deeper regions. That means the soil can get the newer air and oxygen supply in the deeper regions. Now, it is the same reason for the availability of air into the lower reaches of the soil. It is for that precise reason that the farmers, they carry out the process of plowing. Plowing, right? Where you dig up the soil and you plow it up so that the lower regions are upturned and you have the availability of air. Now, while you carry out plowing or tilling activity, there the disadvantage is that when the lower layers are upturned, generally you will have come across the fact that lower layers are slightly moist as compared to the upper layers of the soil. Generally you would have experienced this. Now when you upturn that soil, the lower regions are now exposed up, so that can lose the moisture, that can become very dry as well. So that is the disadvantage that you have with plowing. But in this case, when naturally the cracks will open up, normally they will open up. So that means it will allow the movement of air. So that is the ability of the soil, which is referred to as self-plowing. Allows the penetration of oxygen or air. And this is referred to as self-plowing. That without any external agent during the dry season, it opens up cracks which allows significant amount of air to come in. And here, rather than ounce of moisture, if we are unable to understand the context, it around the last particles, or rather than particles, let's write droplets. Okay, is it understood now, Vivek? Is it understood that what do we mean by droplets? Okay, so this is observed during the dry season. Observed during dry season. Okay, that is what is observed during the dry seasons of the year. So it is typical of Deccan Trap region spread across the northwestern Deccan Plateau and is made up of the lava flows. So the plateaus of Maharashtra, Saurashtra, Malwa, Madhya Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh, and all the way into the southeastern direction along the Godavari and Krishna valleys, occupying portions of Telangana, some portions of northern part of Karnataka as well. They are occupied by the black soil areas. It is rich in calcium carbonate, magnesium, potash, and lime, and poor in phosphate, nitrogen, and organic matter. Why is it poor in organic content and organic matter? Because it is formed as a result of disintegration of the igneous rocks, right? And igneous rocks themselves, they don't consist of any organic component. So that is why here you will not find any organic matter, because formed by disintegration of igneous rocks. Formed by the disintegration of igneous rocks in general. Okay. Then during the dry season, these soil develop the wide cracks. Observe these cracks. They will develop wide cracks, which helps in proper aeration of the soil. Thus, there occurs a kind of self-plowing. Because of this character of slow absorption and loss of moisture, Black soil retains moisture for a very long period of time. It retains moisture for a very long time. And that is helpful for the crops, especially the rain-fed crops. Now we'll study in the next module about what do we understand by rain-fed crops. But here, rain-fed ones are basically the crops which are dependent only on rainfall and do not require any irrigation. So these are crop types which are completely dependent on rainfall. Crop types completely dependent on rainfall. For example, take the case of the crop of cotton. Now, cotton is, as a crop, is sown immediately after the monsoonal rains. Now, after that, the amount of moisture which is present in the soil is sufficient to sustain that crop for a very long time. In the meanwhile, if you have seasonal rains or uh, a sporadic rainfall happening every, let's say, 1 month or so, even that is enough to sustain the cotton crop. So that is basically the rain-fed crops typically to be grown in the black soil region. So in these black soil areas, you will also find the growth of crops such as groundnut, soya, right? So all these, for example, soybeans, all these you will find to be growing in that area. So this particular region, we have talked about the map pointing. So now I can ask you a question. If I have the presence of Vindhyas and Satpura in this area, this particular region of black soil, what is it referred to? Which plateau is this where you will find the presence of black soil? Very good, Utkarsh. Very nice. No, Pranay, the Deccan traps, they continue all the way from here. Nice, Vishwa. Okay, good now. So this is the region which we also regard as the Malwa region, the Malwa Plateau. So this is also the Malwa Plateau. So black soil also to be found to the south. This is where it is present to the south of Bundelkhand area. So to the south of Bundelkhand, you will find the presence of Malwa Plateau, and in Deccan Plateau also, you will find the presence of black soil. Okay. Now, after this, we come to another kind of soil. Yes, Solanki, correct. After this, we come to another kind of soil, that is red and yellow soil. Now, red and yellow soil for the remaining portion of the entire peninsula plateau, you will find either red and or yellow soil. Now, the name is given purely because of the color that they end up attaining or the color that they end up achieving. So here, when you talk about red and yellow soil, again, formed by the disintegration of igneous and metamorphic rocks. Dhanya, it is called yellow soil because it will have that yellowish color. It will have that presence of yellowish color. Why yellowish color? We'll come to it. So basically, here they are formed as a result of disintegration of crystalline, igneous, and metamorphic rocks. Now, crystalline, igneous, and metamorphic rocks, when they are disintegrated, the soil formed, do you think it will have the presence of organic component, or do you think it will be devoid of organic component? Good. So it will be devoid of organic component. That is why even this red and yellow soil, that will be significantly devoid of organic component. This will not have organic component. Now, the igneous rocks and the metamorphic rocks, they are infused with some or the other quantity of iron in that region. So that is where you will find the disintegration of those iron crystallines that will lead to the formation of red soil, because iron gives that reddish color. So that is where you have the red soil. Now, in areas which are dry, red soil can be formed. But let's suppose this disintegration has happened in an area which has got significant amount of rainfall occurring in that area. So in those regions where you have significant quantity of rainfall which occurs, there the iron present, it reacts with the hydroxyl ions or the water in itself to form hydroxides. And those hydroxides, they have the yellowish appearance. So in the plateau region, whichever are the drier areas of the plateau, there you will find distinct red soil. But wherever you have the moist regions of the plateau, there you will find the hydroxides of iron giving it a yellow appearance. So dry regions, red soil will be found in dry region, and this red turns yellow in the presence of moisture. So yellow soil is found in the rainier areas of Peninsula Plateau. Okay, let us take a look. So red soil develops on crystalline igneous rocks in areas of low rainfall in eastern and southern part of the Deccan Plateau, eastern part of the Deccan Plateau and the southern part of Deccan Plateau, and also along the Piedmont zone of the Western Ghat. That is, when you consider the leeward side of the Western Ghats immediately in the rain shadow zone, Piedmont basically refers to any region which is immediately below that mountain. So that is why Piedmont. So basically to the level lower than the mountain, that is the Piedmont zone. So in the leeward side of the Western Ghats, where you generally end up receiving lesser amount of rainfall, that is where you'll find this type of soil. They are also to be found in the regions of Odisha and Chhattisgarh and to the southern plains of the Ganga River basin. Now, this soil develops a reddish color due to wide diffusion of iron in crystalline, igneous, and metamorphic rock. In the crystalline, igneous, and metamorphic rock. Okay, and yellow when it occurs in a hydrated form. So that is where generally you'll find it. Does not mean that where you will find red soil does not mean that there will be no rainfall. No, where you find red soil, it will be drier in nature. Amount or the quantity of rainfall will be generally lesser in nature. Okay, now the fine grained yellow and red soil, they are fertile, whereas the large grained soil found in upland areas at an altitude, they are poor in fertility. Why? Because when we talked about the coarse grained soil, we have talked about it, that coarse grained soil, they are unable to retain air and moisture. And hence, that is very much required for by the roots of the plants to grow significantly. Did metamorphic soil, rock soil is fertile, Vishwa? So see, sometimes as you can see here, if the grains are very, very fine, let's suppose, and in a region, if further organic component is also present, it can turn out to be fertile. Okay, so you cannot affix it that a soil formed as a result of igneous or metamorphic won't be fertile. Generally, you will find that the depositional soils, the alluvial soils, they are the most fertile. Okay, they will naturally promote the growth of the plants because they will have many different components included within it. Okay, red soil also found in raining areas. In not very high rainfall areas, you won't find red soil. No. Generally, in drier areas, you will find the red soil to be present. So observe poor in nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic component, that is humus. Why poor in organic component? Because formed as a result of disintegration of igneous and metamorphic rock. Now, let us take a look at the larger perspective. So when you draw the map of the country, here observe that in the entirety of the region of the peninsular plateau that you would have observed extending even in the northeastern portion, in that entirety of the peninsular plateau, you have the presence of red and yellow soil, because that is where you have the presence of iron and or the presence of igneous and metamorphic rock, other than the region where you have had significant amount of outpouring of basaltic lava flow. So this is an area where you have had significant outpouring of basaltic lava. So that is why here you will find black soil. Other than that, you will find alluvial soil in this region. Alluvial soil, isn't it? Here you will find the presence of red and yellow soil. Okay. So if you have that much of a clue, you can always end up drawing a rough map of India. You won't be required to learn where the soil distribution is. If a question is asked, you can randomly draw the map of India, and you can always end up indicating that this will be an area of black soil, red soil, alluvial soil, and so on. Can black soil carry sugarcane cultivation? Yes. Black soil carries significant sugarcane cultivation. That is why traditional sugarcane growing region you will observe is Maharashtra. Maharashtra has got a lot of sugarcane production carried on. So that is in the black soil region. Okay. Roshan, black soil and alluvial soil, there's a lot of difference. Black soil is formed in that zone itself by disintegration of the basaltic rocks. Alluvial soil is formed as a result of deposits carried out by the rivers. Black soil will have certain other characteristics. So, what is the point of confusion between black soil and alluvial soil? Let me know that. Then I will be able to answer your question in a better way. Yes, Pranay, most of the rainfall. But sugarcane, Pranay, will require the presence of irrigation facilities as well. It is in the lack of irrigation facilities when the farmers in Maharashtra they grew sugarcane for a long period of time. That is why they experienced a lot of crop failures happening, because sugarcane requires high amount of water availability. Vishal, the reason for presence of alluvial soil in the narrow region of, so here you have the Aravalis in this region. The Aravalis are present. So you will have narrow streams and rivers such as Luni, which will originate. All these streams, you have Mahi in this area, you have Sabarmati in this area. All these streams will carry out the deposits. That is why in this region you will find the deposits of this soil, alluvial soil. This particular tract of land between Rajasthan and the region of Gujarat, where you have the deposit, this is also what is referred to as Rajasthan Bagar. Rajasthan Bagar. Okay, that is the tract of land. And generally, you will find that because there are drier conditions here, and the amount of deposits carried out by the river is not very significant. That is why here also the properties of soil in Rajasthan Bagar will be very similar to the old alluvial properties. It will have larger nodules, not very fertile, ability to support only the coarse grained crops, etc. will be observed. I hope that is understood, Vishal. Okay. Any doubts that we have? Show me the red soil. Do you want me to bring red soil and show it to you? How do I show you the red soil? This is basically how the red soil appears. This is how the red soil appears. Okay. So that is the maximum I can do for you as of now. Okay. We have other soil types also, laterite soil and other soil types also. And this is something we will cover after the lunch break. That what do we understand by the laterite soil? What are forest soils, saline soils, how they are created, the types of soil erosion, and then we will move on into agriculture. For all of you, I would suggest any problem that you are facing in any portion of geography, right? Any portion of geography that we have covered, any issues, be it of geomorphology, be it of climatology, be it of oceanography, be it of Indian geography. Tomorrow, when we are going to have the last session from roughly around 10 to 4 or 4:30, please feel free to ask those problems tomorrow. Okay? But please understand, those problems should not be in the nature that please explain the jet streams again because I missed out the lecture and I could not understand. Please explain the entire portion of Indian monsoon again. No, any portion that you have studied. So, pinpointed doubts in any part of geography, feel free to bring it to the notice tomorrow. We'll take up those questions significantly tomorrow. Arid soil is generally found in the dry areas, in very dry areas. Okay. So, now we take the lunch break. Okay. So, lunch break will be carried out from 1 to 2. And there, after 2, that is when we will meet. Red soil, Sai Babu, is formed as a result of disintegration of the igneous and the metamorphic rocks which have the presence of crystalline iron component. Now, when that is drier, it gives the red appearance because of the presence of iron. And whenever you have the presence of moisture, that turns that iron into hydroxide form. And that is what gives the yellowish appearance to the soil. Hence, you have yellow soil. So it is not available for agriculture, not unless and until irrigated, which is the area mostly for arid soil, southern part of Haryana, portions of Rajasthan. That is where you will find a lot of these arid soils. Okay, that is where aridity is considered to be associated with dry conditions. Okay, so we take a break up till 2 p.m. and we get back. How many types of soil are there? You have many types of soil. In India, you have the classification as 8 types of soil which are there, out of which 4 are relevant. Did you miss the initial part of the lecture, Roshan? Is it that you ended up joining late? Because by the type of questions that you are framing, I get an idea that you have joined late. So if you have joined late, be kind enough and be courteous enough to look at it from the portion of the recordings. Please don't ask me to repeat the entire process. So then what is the fault of those candidates who have joined early and who have attended everything patiently? Okay, so let's not have that kind of a special bureaucratic treatment in the session. But crops in red and yellow soil, generally, if you provide that kind of cultivation treatment, any kind of crop can be grown other than paddy, etc. We also see the area of Rajasthan in some place to growing some crops. Yes, you have the Indira Gandhi Canal bringing water in that region. So if you bring fertility and if you bring moisture in that region, yes, agriculture can definitely be carried out. Okay, see, growth of plants, cultivation is what? Growth of plants. Growth of plants will require air, moisture, nutrients. If I apply nutrients in arid soil by fertilizer, if I ensure water is present perpetually, obviously agriculture can be carried out. So that is why in the some parts of Shekhawati region, in the western part, which are influenced by the presence of Indira Gandhi Canal, also in this particular portion here, which are influenced by the small streams originating from Aravalis. All of this basically are under cultivation in Rajasthan. Okay. So that is where we will take a break. Example of plants to be grown in yellow soil, as simple as tubers like potatoes. You can grow that in yellow soil, right? Maize, you can grow that in yellow soil. So these are examples of the crops grown. Why black soil is also referred to as self-plowing? Because it originally and automatically opens up large cracks on the surface. Okay. And due to the dry condition, it opens up large cracks. Hence, it is self-plowing. Okay. We'll come to the farmer suicide issue later on when we talk about agriculture. So now we take a break till 2 and we get back after 2 p.m. and we continue.